Taken by the Titan II Homecoming. Written by Morgan Black. Narration services are provided by 11 Labs, Inc., produced by Morgan Black. Chapter 1. Cal. I jerked awake to the blaring sirens, my heart hammering against my ribs. What the hell was this? Were we under attack? I exchanged a panicked look with Thorsten before throwing back the covers and rushing to the boys' room. Thor! Loki! I cried out, shaking their small bodies, but they remained still, locked in some doomed slumber. Thorsten! Get Thor out of the house while I... They were already gone. I shook my head, brushing off the discrepancy. My only thought now was to get our remaining son to safety. I grabbed Loki's shoulders, lifting his lolling head in desperation, but it sagged lifeless in my hands, his limbs cold and limp beneath my frantic grasp. Terror clawed its way up my throat as I begged and pleaded for them to wake, my voice cracking, tears streaking my cheeks. But my precious boys did not stir, entrapped in an unnatural, deathly sleep. The walls of the darkened room seemed to melt away before my eyes, shadows swirling sickeningly. I now stood alone in a cavernous, ruined throne room, dust and debris scattered around my feet. The high ceiling had partially caved in, allowing thin shafts of pale light to slice through the gloom. My heartbeat thundered in my ears as I took in the crumbling columns and faded banners bearing unfamiliar, sinister crests. A menacing presence lurked in this doomed place, a baleful darkness that threatened to swallow me whole. Faceless Titan lords materialized out of the gloom, flickering lights casting their hooded figures in menacing silhouettes.
Abomination!
One hissed accusingly, bony fingers pointing my way. What did you do to my sons, you bastards? My protective instincts drowned my fear. The shadowy figures only laughed, a cold, mocking sound that echoed ominously through the desolate hall. I had to escape. This place couldn't be real. Spotting an arched entryway, I broke into a desperate run, but I skidded to a horrified halt at the sight that awaited me, the air punching from my lungs. Thorsten lay lifeless on the mosaic floor, eyes staring vacantly upward, dark blood pooling beneath him. No! I screamed, sprinting to his side. I collapsed beside him, pulling his hulking frame into my lap. Thorsten, I sobbed, clasping his cold, lifeless face in trembling hands, pleading futilely for him to wake up. But my beloved mate remained devastatingly still, lifeless. I cried out. I couldn't do anything else. Why the hell am I so goddamn weak? The cries of gulls and the soothing whispers of ocean waves filtered in through the open bedroom window as the morning sun crept across the floor. The gossamer curtains fluttered in the balmy desert breeze. I stirred slowly, waking to the melodic morning prayers drifting from the nearby village. It was just a dream, a terribly vivid nightmare, but I still couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that dominated my thoughts. Why was I thinking about stuff like this now? For the past month, I couldn't stop thinking about what would happen once me and the boys entered that portal to the Titan world. Each and every dream became more and more nightmarish as time went on. At first, I was getting rejected at family dinner. Next, I was forced to eat on the floor, then I had to eat off the damn floor. Each dream getting worse until this newest round of dream torture. Blinking my eyes open, I gazed affectionately at Thorsten's titanic form beside me, sound asleep and snoring softly. Even sprawled diagonally across our modest bed, his legs still dangled off the mattress. The amusing sight brought a smile to my lips. Unable to resist, I leaned over and pressed a kiss to Thorsten's forehead, brushing back a wisp of starlight hair. Our beachside villa was far humbler than Thorsten's lavish apartments back in Jotun. The whitewashed walls and terracotta-tiled roof gave it a simple charm. Warmth emanated from its wooden beams and furnishings. The front door opened to a cozy living area with soft rugs and plush pillows that were perfect for lounging. Farther back was a modest kitchen with a hand-pump sink and a large fireplace. On one side of the small courtyard were the bedrooms. The larger suite was for us, with a dwarven-sized bed, and a smaller room for the twins with 2 child-sized beds they were already growing out of. My dad preferred the canopied roof outside. The back patio balcony overlooked the sea, with a carved table and bench chairs to take meals or watch the sunset. Overall, our home felt intimate yet airy, a place made for humans and titans to live in. The artisanal decor gave it a unique charm that made me love it here. So much so that I was dragging my heels on telling Thorsten when I was ready to enter the portal. Don't get me wrong, I actually wanted to see his homeworld, and I knew just how much he had wanted to return. As an exile, he no longer had access to that archive back in old New York, where he would watch vids of home. And although the portal was working, he was still trapped here because of me and my stupid fears. The mingling scents of fresh bread and fragrant spices from the markets filled the air outside. The town's energy could be heard even from our secluded abode. The perk Thorsten had of still being respected as a royal prince. The fishing village of Dakhla was the fabled sanctuary known as Sahara. The place was located in western Sahara, hence the name of the sanctuary. The village was and still is occupied by a country called Morocco, and you would think you would see nothing but desert sands, but that's not the case with the area sitting along a narrow peninsula of the Atlantic coast. Dakhla, like most of Africa, wasn't impacted physically by the cataclysmic Titan arrival. However, the continent still struggled through lean, uncertain times during the economic collapse of human society. The only thing we had here besides its abundance of sea life, thanks to its productive current system and no Audiobook upswelling nearby, but a thriving oyster farming, which was still done traditionally by hand by the locals. The Titans didn't care too much for the texture, but they loved the pearls. From time to time, I would scoop up some on my dives to sell to traders who humanely scooped out the precious jewels to ship overseas. As a matter of fact, that's how Thorsten, my dad, and I managed to get to this place. We had made it as far as Quebec, and we had to earn our passage across the Atlantic by agreeing to a few dive missions on board an old cruise ship. The ship was used to transport the jewels and other resources from Africa to North America. It was kind of invigorating to participate in the slow and steady process of repairing the damage caused by the Titan arrival. It made me see that the world truly was much bigger than I had ever imagined, and the sanctuary cities felt like small oases in comparison. When I first laid eyes on Dakhla, I couldn't believe this place was real, a place that managed to remain the same since before the Titan's arrival. No wonder Titans and humans had escaped here. It was different here than in the other sanctuary cities. The Titans were open, instead of living in a palace of seclusion. Even Vanir, which I praised for its safety, still had Titan rulers who never mingled with the common folk. After stealing a fond glimpse of my slumbering partner, I slid from bed carefully to let Thorsten rest. I cracked open the twins' bedroom, chuckling at the sight of our 4-year-olds Thor and Loki, who were still fast asleep with the covers kicked all over the place, and poor Thor was practically halfway out of bed. I tiptoed over and straightened him out, tucking both him and his brother in. I marveled at their swift growth, so much bigger than human children their age already. As a result, they were too big to play with the kids their own age, but also too little to play with the older kids. Maybe watching them struggle here was behind my nightmares about Utengard and the possible harsh treatment we could face if we went there. But what if going to Thorsten's world was the best possible solution for them? I could hardly believe I had given birth to them myself. The painful yet exhilarating ordeal remained seared into my memory. Shutting the door gently behind me so as not to disturb their slumber, I headed outside to start my morning routine, eager to enjoy the serenity of early dawn before the heat of the day set in. After stretching my muscles, I began flowing through practiced fighting forms on the beach, keeping my movements precise and meditative, my feet digging into the sand. The rhythmic shushing of waves and cries of wheeling gulls underscored each focused form. Barris, Yarn Saxa's human mate, began offering self-defense courses for the humans here, and I practically jumped at the chance to learn. With everything that happened to me before, getting set up, betrayed, and sold into slavery, suffering a devastating injury to my right eye, and my overall lack of ability to defend myself when those men burst into my dad's hospital room and took me away. My confidence was shattered piece by piece until I felt almost like a shell of my former self. Taking these courses, learning how to defend myself, was my way of getting that confidence back. And I did. I eventually got rid of the eye patch and accepted the scars. I felt more capable than ever. If anyone came for me, my children, or Thorsten again, I would be able to do more than just place everything on Thorsten's shoulders.
Chapter 2. Thorsten. I awoke to the tantalizing aroma of sizzling fish drifting in through the open window, and my appetite instantly stirred. Lumbering outside, I spotted William, Cal's father, minding the day's catch over the crackling grill, grease popping and hissing. "Morning," I rumbled in greeting, my gravelly voice still heavy with sleep.
"Morning, you look like hell.
William laughed cheerily with a wave of his spatula. The dancing flames framed his handsome, weathered face in a warm glow. I studied William's features, all sharp angles and slightly creased skin, evidence of a life spent braving the elements. Yet it was easy to tell that the old guy was a looker back in his heyday, and Cal strongly favoured him, from the intense green eyes to the proud nose and strong jawline. The only difference between the two was that Cal's face was still boyish and smooth, and now that the two of us were linked as mates, it would be that way for a very long time. I wondered how Cal would take living for centuries on end. After all, if humans were meant to live for 1,000 years, then they would. Would his mind break after watching so many people die? A part of me did not think so. My mate had gotten stronger, he even filled out more, developing a little more muscle and definition, and he seemed more confident and self-assured than when we had first met. But even so, he has never faced a mental challenge as the one he will embark on throughout the years. Although he wasn't unaccustomed to facing tragedy, he suffered the loss of his mother. My mind suddenly drifted through the past, recalling when I had first hired William and his wife, Cal's late mother. What was her name? Luna? To recover the Traveller's Rune, they were one of many I had hired at the time. Most of the divers I hired weren't much to note. Most just wanted money and nothing more. However, these two were different. How young and determined they had seemed then, so full of conviction in their cause to rid their world of the Titan menace. I almost felt as if it was fitting that they were working on accomplishing that very goal by aiding me. Unfortunately, the rune they had proudly presented me was one of Fellman's countless forgeries. Of course, by the time I uncovered the deception, William and Luna had long vanished without a trace. A shame, I actually would have hired them as my personal divers long term. But instead, his fiery mother had died somewhere in the world for her cause. I remember it being such a waste of talent. Now here we were, improbably bonded by family despite our uneasy past association. William's devotion to Cal conquered any lingering wariness between us. I trusted he was a man of integrity, whatever his former allegiances. The past could remain buried. Today we broke bread as kin. The heat is just as rough on me as the cold, I rumbled sincerely in response, settling my creaking frame onto the rough-hewn log bench. The logs groaned slightly under my massive weight. As I watched William deftly flip the fish, he launched into recounting his cooking exploits from this morning. Amusement glinted in his eyes as he described a daring seagull swooping down to snatch a freshly grilled fish right off the plate. I let out a rumbling laugh at the image. It takes a bold thief to steal from under your watch, William.
You're just blowing smoke up my ass to make me feel better. I'm not as spry as I used to be,
he admitted with a self-deprecating chuckle.
Anyway, the cheeky bugger had to dunk the hot catch in the sea to cool it off first.
We shared another hearty laugh. Despite our differences, William and I had built an easy rapport over the years, bonded by our mutual love for Cal and the twins. I knew our past history, fraught with tension between human and Titan, weighed heavily on him at times. But his devotion to family conquered all. And though he struggled to understand Cal undergoing the worm to bear my children, he cherished the boys fiercely. That was enough for me. Right on cue, the twins came barreling outside, boisterous and energetic as ever. Grinning, I gave chase, their delighted laughter contagious. Scooping them up in my strong arms, I tickled their little bellies as they squealed before instructing them to get cleaned up for breakfast. Soon after, Cal came sloshing back from his habitual morning ocean dip. Thank the gods I won't have to deal with them alone. Wrangling our rambunctious duo without backup first thing could be daunting, even for me.
Papa!
The boys cried out in unison, barreling over to embrace Cal. Chuckling, he wrapped them in a big, soggy hug. Let's get you dressed before you catch a cold, I interjected, herding the energetic pair back inside. Even small tasks like getting dressed became an adventure with these two.
Let me get out of these wet clothes first.
Cal reached up, wrapping his arms around my neck, and I allowed him to pull me down into a kiss. He smelled like the ocean, and his kiss was just as salty. I pulled away and sucked in a breath. If I did not stop now, then I was going to tell the kids to just go eat while I had my own breakfast. Cal laughed and softly patted my crotch before disappearing into our room. "Let's get you boys ready for the day." I sighed, turning my focus back on the children. They balked at my conservative clothing selections, clamoring for the gaudiest outfits imaginable. "How about we compromise today?" I proposed diplomatically. They reluctantly agreed, and I helped squeeze them into slightly more vibrant attire than my original picks. Compromise was essential when parenting such fiery spirits. Sometimes I picture them running about my castle and getting into all manner of trouble. As I wrestled to get their tiny flailing limbs into sleeves, I marveled again at their size. Though only 4, they had nearly surpassed my own boyhood stature. More Titan blood clearly flowed in their veins than anticipated. This made life here a little harder for them, as none of the human children their age would play with them. And yet their minds weren't developed enough to horse around with the older kids, and there were no Titan children to play with. Jan Saxa and Barras had left the moment the portal was finished. She didn't wish to birth her child in the human world. If they survived the journey through the portal, then their child would be the same age as mine. Catching my eye as they scampered off to eat, Cal remarked,
"At this rate, they'll be towering over me by 10.
I chuckled deeply, pulling him into a tender embrace and stroked his still damp hair. I treasured these chaotic mornings. Soon we gathered to enjoy breakfast al fresco, collaborating to set out the mouth-watering spread William had prepared. The aromatic feast of eggs, bacon, grilled spicy salted fish, and sweet rice swiftly began disappearing between my own appetites and the twins' voracity. Around the laid-back table, affectionate chaos reigned. The boys excitedly recounted a fantastical dream through sticky mouthfuls as I listened with amusement. Soaking in the intimate scene, I committed each precious detail to memory. The melodic chatter, William's cooking, the crying gulls eager for scraps. Despite all we had endured, we had finally built a loving family and home. But truth be told, I wanted more. My sons were princes, and yet they lived almost like paupers. I wanted to pamper and spoil them and my mate, and yet I was no more than a simple fisherman here, and I was restless like no other. I was used to having a goal and fighting to achieve it, and now I was just living. And I was still full of bittersweet nostalgia for my distant homeland. Family and friends, an entire universe away, yet still cherished across the yawning void. I wondered what my elder brother Radogan was up to now. The last I had spoken with him, he was taking on more responsibilities as crown prince to prepare for eventually assuming the throne. Unlike in human history where one ruler must die for the next to inherit, it was not uncommon among Titans for a ruler to simply retire, passing the crown willingly to their heir. Perhaps Radogan already reigned as king now. I chuckled inwardly, picturing my stoic brother sitting stern-faced on that bone-polished throne, so unlike our gentle father. Gazing west across the endless horizon, colours blurred by harsh sunlight, I allowed my thoughts to drift of fantasies of using the hidden portal. Home was right there on the other side. Yet foreboding apprehension gave me pause. With no word back from the Titans who had already crossed through, the risks were unknown. Should I traverse it alone first to investigate? But what if I became trapped somewhere and unable to return like the others? For all I knew, we could end up anywhere on the other side. Trapped in a caved-in cave, a moor pit, or even under the ocean. This is why we crossed into the human world via a transport ship. But no such precautions could be done with this portal. It was too small. And even if the crossing was successful, I would have to reach the portal at my facility at home and continue my research on linking the portals to ensure I landed back in Dakla without causing another apocalyptic event. But abandoning my newfound family, even temporarily, was unthinkable. And so the conundrum persisted.
Chapter 3. Cal. It was nearing evening when Thorsten finally returned home to find me tucking an exhausted Thor and Loki into bed, their eyes fluttering shut as I kissed their foreheads goodnight. Thorsten didn't think I knew about his wandering off to the cave where the hidden portal sat waiting for him to cross over. From time to time, I had caught his gaze drifting away from us, and I didn't like it. After I had the boys, I was prepared for Thorsten to announce that we were going through, but for some reason, he never mentioned it at all, like the portal he fought so hard to build didn't even exist anymore. Maybe he had sensed my growing anxiety and didn't want to worry me about it. Yeah, it was my fault. I kept telling myself that I understood how Thorsten felt being away from home, but if I did, then why not get over my fears and rip the proverbial Band-Aid off? Just tell him I was ready to cross over. Did I truly understand how he feels being away from his home and family when I have my entire family here? I grew up mainly a nomad aside from settling in Veneer. My dad made it clear that I shouldn't view Veneer as a permanent settlement and that I shouldn't be afraid to leave whenever the need arose. I never had a place I could truly call my home. I couldn't understand, at least not completely, how Thorsten felt. And I couldn't pretend I was gung-ho about crossing into that portal to a world entirely foreign from my own. Maybe that's why I let him go for so long without bringing it up myself. I was being selfish in letting him sacrifice his chance at seeing his family again for my sake. Wordlessly, Thorsten wrapped me in a tender yet secure embrace as soon as we reached the privacy of our bedroom.
You ate without me.
He huffed, though there was no real anger in his tone. You know how the boys are when they want something. They're just like you, I chuckled in response.
Like me? Are you comparing me to children?
When it comes to getting your way? Hell yeah, I am, I teased gently. Thorsten's lips descended on mine, his soft caresses teasing and tantalizing as I trembled beneath his touch. His arms encircled me in a passionate embrace as our bodies intertwined, the heat of his skin searing my own. The power of his kiss was intoxicating, inflaming my desire with each sensual exploration of his tongue. I want to tell you something, I breathed.
Is it important?
He moved his hands down my body. I gasped as his fingers found the edges of my shirt, tugging it off me. His silver eyes flashed with desire as he took in the sight of my exposed skin. I closed my eyes, feeling his heart beat against mine. This was love. You still awake? I whispered. Thorsten stirred, his silver eyes blinking open.
I am now, little one.
I took a deep breath before speaking again. Let's go through the portal. I want to meet your family. Thorsten looked at me with surprise, propping himself up on one elbow. 100 unspoken thoughts seemed to swirl through his mind.
Why are you bringing this up so suddenly?
It's not sudden, I explained. I've been thinking about it since the portal was first fixed 4 years ago. I know you think about going home all the time. I can see it in your eyes when you stare off at the horizon. And I know you only delay for our sake. I took his hand, looking earnestly into his eyes. I don't want to be the cause of your unhappiness. Not when the chance to reunite with your family is so close now. Thorsten sighed heavily, rolling onto his back.
It's true, I do think of it often, but I would never want to place you and the children in peril with no escape. What if those who already travelled through became stranded or walked into turmoil in Utangard?
His brows knitted with worry. I nodded, conceding the risk was real. I know, and I won't pretend I'm not scared. But I also don't want us to be the reason you never see your homeland again after so many centuries. You have an entire family waiting for you on the other side.
You're my family too.
I know, and I'll always be with you, I said, curling his strand around my finger. I just keep thinking about how anything could happen to the portal while we're waiting. What if it just stops working?
If that happens, then I will rebuild it again.
He kissed the back of my hand.
You would brave the unknown for my sake. You're too good to me, little one.
I give what is given to me. I know you're willing to stay if I tell you to.
You'll be leaving the human world behind with no assurance you could return.
I know, but I'm a natural-born nomad. I think I can handle it.
If you are certain, then yes. I want to return home with you by my side.
He then kissed me deeply. As long as we're together, I know everything will be okay.
Chapter 4. Thorsten. The next morning at breakfast, Cal and I informed William and the twins of our decision to finally journey through the portal to Utangard. William's weathered face creased with worry. His eggs forgotten.
Are you boys sure about this? Crossing over could be dangerous. What about waiting for the scouts sent through to return?
He looked at Cal pleadingly.
We have a good life here, don't we?
Cal nodded, but stood firm.
I'm sorry, Dad, but I've made up my mind. It's been 4 years since the portal was fixed. We can't wait any longer. But once we assess the situation over there, we can return through the portal Thorsten built at his facility. I won't leave you to worry for long.
Well, into the belly of the beast it is then.
He clapped his hands together with forced cheer.
So what provisions should we pack for this wee adventure?
We? You're coming?
Cal's green eye widened.
Of course I am. I won't let my precious grandchildren go without me.
Are you sure?
I've been exploring the unknown since before you were born. What better way to retire than to head into the ultimate unknown?
We're going on a quest!
Loki cried, bouncing in his seat. Meanwhile, his stoic older brother simply turned his head and smiled, as if no one could see him. Watching them be so excited to go to my homeland was enough to dull my nerves. I had told them so many stories about Utangard. I even began speaking Eotenus, my mother tongue, around them more frequently, and even did my best to teach it to Cal. After eating, we packed lightly at my advice, bringing only the essentials. Everything we couldn't take, Cal planned to give it to the others in the sanctuary. William bundled dried meat, fruit, nuts, and other non-perishables for eating, and filled several canteens with fresh water. I hoped it would suffice. As we prepared to cross the portal, conflicting emotions warred within me. I was eager to return home after so many centuries, to see my ancestral land again and reunite with family. Yet nervous excitement also bubbled within. I didn't know how my people would take to humans or my hybrid children. If we encountered hostility in Utangard, I was prepared to take Cal and the twins to the safety of my castle in the northern lands, where my research facility and portal is located. If need be, we could return here, though I would not allow my family to live as paupers like this again. I would amass wealth so they could live in comfort, whatever it took. Truth be told, I disliked this place. It was too damn hot during the day and too damn cold at night. I disliked this humble home we had made. My mate deserved better, and so did my children. They were born of royal blood. After all, and even within this apocalyptic hellscape, they still deserved the best it could offer. But these thoughts I would keep to myself. Either way, I hoped it all worked out. I would love for Cal and the children to remain in Utangard, and I was prepared to fight tooth and nail for their place within it. Running away was simply a last resort. No matter what awaited beyond the portal, I would protect them at all costs. None would harm them as long as I drew breath. I just prayed my royal status would shield us from any who would mean them ill. A week later. On the other side of town, I met with Doug, the Titan leader who had governed Dakla since its earliest days. Though stern, he had always ruled justly. When I told Doug I was departing for Utangard, he nodded gravely.
Your royal kin will rejoice at your return. You must be eager to leave.
Yet a silent question lurked in his flinty eyes. Sensing my unspoken doubt, Dar asked bluntly,
Do you believe your family will truly accept a human mate and half-blood sons as equals?
My jaw tightened, but I answered honestly, I do not know, but they will have to accept it, for I have made my choice and shall not repent it. My longing to see home again after so many endless years apart overwhelmed all else. Dar clasped my shoulder firmly with his large hand.
Then I wish you and yours safe passage through the void. Know this refuge remains open, should you return.
His words were kind, yet underscored my own nagging concerns. That final night, we gathered around a crackling fire pit, sharing roasted fish and bittersweet laughter as stars blazed overhead. I couldn't wait to get a hold of fresh meat and barrier berries back home. The twins excitedly pestered me with questions about Utangard until yawns overtook them both. I indulged their curiosity, describing majestic citadels and landscapes from my distant memories. After tucking the boys into bed, I found Cal standing alone at the balcony, gazing up at the night sky with a contemplative expression. I embraced him, and we stood together in silence. At last, Cal broke the heavy stillness, whispering,
"Do you think they'll ever truly accept me?"
Drawing back to look him in the eyes, I placed my hands upon his shoulders firmly. "They will accept you because you are my mate, and you carry my heirs. Never forget how well loved you are by me. I will do whatever it takes to protect you and our children."
"I know. That's what scares me."
He looked away, unable to meet my gaze any longer. My voice softened as I tucked a strand of hair behind his ear and gently ran my fingers over the old scar on his face. "No matter what happens, we will face it together." He opened his milky white eye and smiled faintly, despite the fear that lurked beneath his expression. I leaned in and pressed my lips against his, feeling the warmth of his mouth against mine. His arms enveloped me as we indulged in a long, deep kiss. I could feel the thumping of his heart, the rise and fall of his chest, and the heat of his body as he pulled me closer. With a gentle kiss on his cheek, I whispered, "Let's go inside and get some rest. Tomorrow is a new day." His arms tightened around me, and we walked back into the warmth of our cabin. As soon as we got inside, he pulled me close and kissed me deeply, his hands wandering through my hair. We were both overcome with desire, and he began to undress me slowly, revealing my creamy skin beneath the layers of clothing. I let him push me onto the bed. He quickly undressed and crawled on top of me. I lay there stroking his hair, his face, and then the definition of his chest as I noted the small changes to his physique. He had developed more muscle, yet he was still lean. If I had to put a word to his body, I would simply call him fit. I drew him closer to me so that our still connected bodies were pressed firmly together, my arms tightly wrapped around his trembling form. "What was that about?" I breathed.
"I don't know what could happen tomorrow, so I wanted to feel anything other than fear."
"Did it work?"
"Yeah, it did. Now I gotta clean the sheets for the next family moving in here."
I chuckled. "What a way to ruin the mood."
"What?"
"I don't want to think about cleaning with you naked and panting over me." Cal laughed.
"I didn't say we were done, big guy. The cleanup comes later."
"Now that's what I want to hear."
Chapter 5. Cal. Our footsteps echoed off the damp cave walls as we trekked deeper underground. The air grew colder and more stagnant, smelling faintly metallic. Stalactites hung from the ceiling like jagged stone teeth, dripping water that plinked into shadowy pools below. I kept one hand on the slick wall to steady myself as the path sloped gradually downward, the ground alternating between loose pebbles and smooth, worn rock. The strobe lights Thorsten had installed to illuminate the way flashed rhythmically, casting our elongated shadows in a dizzying dance. Up ahead, the cavern opened into a larger chamber housing the portal. Our small work lamps seemed puny against the vast darkness. Strange ambient sounds reached my ears. The flutter of leathery wings, skittering claws, the groaning creak of stone. It was easy to imagine this as the gaping maw of some colossal beast. As we drew closer, the towering oval of the portal emerged from the gloom. It seemed to absorb the meager light rather than reflect it, a void of deeper blackness rimmed by an intricate network of cables and machinery. I shivered, the sheer alienness of the gate filling me with trepidation. We were venturing into the unknown, with no way back. Thorsten grabbed my hand tightly as I nervously studied the portal control panel. The indicator lights blinked steadily, calming me somewhat. I knew that Thorsten was confident in his plan, and I had faith that he could make it work. But despite this faith, doubts lingered in my mind. I couldn't help but worry about the difficulties we might face when crossing over to the Titan world. What if things didn't go as planned? Would we be able to return home safely? A wave of anxiety swept over me as I glanced at our children, and that's when I remembered why I was doing this. My worry for them had been growing with each passing day, especially since I noticed some of the local kids here avoiding them. I hadn't mentioned it to Thorsten, but this isolation had been one of my reasons for my decision to leave Sahara and cross through the portal. I wanted Loki and Thor to have a chance at fitting in where their father hailed from, yet I couldn't ignore the fact that even there, our family might not be fully accepted either. But if that happened, I was confident Thorsten and I would carve a place for our family in either world. I checked on my dad, asking, "You doing okay?" He nodded, though his face was pale. "You sure you want to go through with this?" I pressed. William scowled at that.
What, you trying to get rid of me or something?
"No, course not," I said quickly. "Just, giving you an out if you want it." Part of me hoped he might decide to play it safe for once and stay behind. But knowing him, fat chance of that happening.
I ain't staying in this dusty old world without my family. You boys are all I got left, so like it or not, you're stuck with me.
Yep, just as stubborn as I figured. But honestly, his insistence on coming along made me feel a little better. We were in this crazy thing together, for better or worse. "All right," I said, clapping him on the back. "Just don't come crying to me when your arthritis acts up in that frigid Titan world." He barked out a laugh at that.
Do you think I hadn't been listening to your husband, mate? Prattle on and on about his home? I know it isn't all cold there.
I gave him a reassuring pat on the back, happy to have him here before I checked up on my sons, asking, "You boys doing okay?" Thor nodded, his long white hair framing his face. I stroked it gently, then brushed back a loose strand of Loki's dark and white-striped hair from his eyes. They looked so much like their dad, though Thor had my light green eyes. "Got all your toys?" I asked.
I gave mine to Loki.
I noticed the sheathed knife on his belt and shot Thorsten a scolding look. I didn't like him gifting the boys weapons. Thorsten just shrugged.
I had a knife their age too.
I don't like the knife, Papa.
Loki piped up.
I got Sparkle.
He held up the beloved black and white plush cat I had passed down to him. It used to be my mom's. Luna too, she had called it, after her own name. When I was little, I renamed it Boop, after an old black and white cartoon I saw ages ago. Now in Loki's hands, it lived a new life as Sparkle, thanks to the touch of glitter on its nose. That tattered old cat had survived 3 generations of love and play, a little immortal in its own right. I hoped it would continue to be passed down through our family, gathering new names and adventures. "You take good care of Sparkle," I said, ruffling Loki's hair. I was struck by how fast they were both growing up. Soon, neither would have any use for childish things like stuffed animals. But not yet. They were still my little boys. I thought I'd see a shining light emanating from the portal, or maybe even see into the Titan world like it was some sort of mirror. But instead, I could just make out the cave wall on the other side, obscured by a hazy shimmer. "Is it turned on?" I asked Thorsten. He nodded.
It's been active this whole time.
"How does this thing work exactly?"
The portal I built centuries ago should still be open. We constructed it in a research facility at my castle where we first studied the runes. If we're fortunate, someone on the other side may have found a way to link my original portal to this one.
I remember you saying you were working on that before you came through.
Yes, the goal was to build a second gate here in the human world and connect the two, linking Utangard and Earth. Alas, that endeavor was interrupted.
Thorsten went on to warn that if no linkage had occurred, our travel would be unstable. We could end up anywhere in Utangard upon crossing over.
Best case, we arrive in Esmir, my homeland. But if fate is unkind, we may materialize in an enemy's domain.
I nodded, recalling his lessons about the allies and foes in the Titan world, though that knowledge was centuries out of date now. "I'll keep that in mind," I assured him. "Who knows how much has changed since you left." Thorsten grabbed some belts and carabiners, much like those used by rock climbers. He secured one around his own waist, then got to work buckling them securely around the twins and me. William did the same for himself. Each belt was attached to a sturdy rope.
When we first came to Earth, we arrived in several transport ships.
Thorsten explained as he connected our ropes in a line.
As a result, many of us were scattered across your planet. But now, with our limited resources, everyone returning home must be linked together like this.
He went on to explain how he adjusted the strength of the traveler's rune with barriers to not cause the same cataclysmic event. But if I were to be honest, I didn't understand half of what he was saying. He was mostly talking because he was nervous, and so I let him go on without interruption. We formed up in an odd little chain, Thorsten at the front, then the twins, then me, and William at the back. With packs on our shoulders, we stepped closer to the gaping portal. Just before going through, Thorsten gave my hand one last reassuring squeeze. Then we moved forward into the pulsing void, all connected together. Icy darkness enveloped me. My stomach dropped queasily, like plunging down the first steep hill of a roller coaster. Disembodied voices whispered in my ears, sibilant, mocking. And then we emerged on the other side, the blackness receding. I squinted against the sudden light shining on us from a nearby spotlight. We were in a large room, but it was filled with hulking armed titans who rushed at us with weapons drawn.